Good morning, all, and welcome to today's operator meeting. My name is Sienna, and I will be your host for today. As a reminder, all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to put the questions in the chat as they come to your mind. With that being said, first up, we have Director Murphy.
Thanks. Sorry, didn't realize I was muted. It's a heck of a morning. Anyway, forgive me being home with the baby on my lap. It's the weather affected, I think, a lot of us, and hopefully we all understand. But wanted to share a couple of things about our organization very, very briefly, and then let you get into the good work of today's agenda. I wanted to announce that Greg Drama will be serving as interim deputy director. And while he is serving in that capacity, Alex Fisher will be serving as the acting environmental manager. And we've asked Byron to take on some important responsibilities related to launching our underground natural gas storage initiative, which he's accepted, and we're really grateful for that important work. And so I know I have 3 minutes on the agenda, but I really probably only needed one. And hopefully everybody can either refill their coffee or we can just jump straight into the important conversation around cumulative impacts and enhanced systems and practices and the guidance. I know that that's been a huge undertaking for all of our stakeholders and our organization. And those rules are very quickly going to be in effect. And we've been working hard on making sure there's a relatively seamless transition into their implementation. So, with that, I would cede the floor, appreciate everybody's grace today, and hope you all stay warm. And those of you who get to play in the snow get to play in the snow. Thanks so much, Sienna.
Thank you, Director Murphy. Next up, we have Stephen.
Thank you very much. Um, Perfect. Um, Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Schwarz. I am the Regulatory Affairs Specialist within the Cumulative Impacts and Energy Transition Unit here at ECMC, and I'm going to be speaking with you this morning about the cumulative impacts and enhanced systems and practices rulemaking implementation. My presentation today is focused more specifically on forms development and guidance related to those rules. Next slide, please. So the main headline, I suppose, for my presentation today is that none of the updated or brand new forms related to the CI-ESP rulemaking will be ready for the December 15th implementation date of those rules. With that being said, let me walk through the deployment date for each of those going forward. The Form 2A is receiving minor updates. It will be released in web forms in early 2025. The Form 2B is receiving significant updates from the rulemaking. It will be released also in web forms, also in early 2025. For our two new forms, the Form 2D will be released in the eForms system. It will be released also in early 2025, and we are working with our partners in OIT that this will be released with enough time to meet the February 15th deadline for Form 2D submittal. And then finally, the new Form 2F, which is effectively the CAP or Comprehensive Area Plan version of the Form 2B, will be released in the eForm system after the 2A, 2B, and 2D are released. Next slide, please. So in terms of guidance, the big guidance we're working on in relation to the Form 2A has to do with the cumulative impacts analysis, or the CIA. If you'll recall, this is a more comprehensive document that replaces what was the cumulative impacts plan. And we are working on operator guidance related to this new required attachment and targeting the guidance release by December 20th. With relation to the Form 2B, we are working on more detailed form instructions than we have given previously to the Form 2B, and we are targeting that guidance to be released when the updated amended Form 2B is released in early 2025. With the Form 2D, again, this guidance will be released with the form, and we are focusing and paying attention to making sure that the guidance and the form itself will be released enough time for operators to understand it and get those submitted prior to the rule-based February 15th deadline. And then finally, the Form 2F guidance will be released with the Form 2F, again, after the 2A, 2B updates and the brand new 2D are released. So next slide. Oh, perfect. So the question, many of you are probably thinking, how will we know when these are released? Regardless of whether they're released prior to or after the next operator meeting, I will be presenting at the January 14th operator meeting with another update on where things stand in relation to the guidance documents I just talked about, as well as the updated and brand new forms in web forms and e-forms. Prior to that operator meeting, of course, please watch on our website for any announcements. We will be announcing things there in it if they are being released in advance of that operator meeting. And finally, next slide. Big question wanted to get out ahead of what do I do if I want to submit an OGDP or a CAP, but the updated forms or the new forms aren't released yet? If you have any questions about submitting OGDPs or CAPs after December 15th and the forms are not released, please contact the Cumulative Impacts Energy Transition Manager, Sabrina Trask, and she will provide more detailed information and guidance specific to the applications and projects you are seeking to submit to us. And we are hoping to take things on a case-by-case basis. And if that changes, again, I will have a further update for you at the January meeting. And I believe that is all I have. Thank you very much, and I will circle back at the end to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up, we have Rebecca.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Treats, Senior Location Assessment Specialist here at ECMC, and I'm going to go over the pre-application meetings as part of the new rules. Next slide, please. The purpose of this is to get various interested parties together to discuss new oil and gas development. This can happen two different ways. So there we have the 301F3 for local or federal process and 301G for ECMC pre-application meetings. Next slide, please. So if it's under the local government or the federal agency, so yes, like WOGLA meetings do count for this. Adams County and Garfield also have pre-application meetings, and I know a few municipalities are starting to have them. If the county provides a summary, then the operator should make sure that this summary is sent to ECMC and make sure it's attached to the Form 2A as part of the rule. So in the meeting for the federal agency or the local government needs to meet 301G1. If it meets all of that, like I said, like the WOGLA meeting, then that's good. If not, an additional meeting will be required through ECMC. So when would that not count? If there's like an on-site meeting where maybe not all interested parties are there, looking at something specific, anything like that, that's great for like the consultation part of the 2A or being attached to the 2A, but that does not count necessarily as a pre-application meeting. The pre-application meeting should be all parties sitting down and we have kind of a list of what we're going to discuss. So that can happen, like I said, through 301 F3 is the local government process or federal process, and those can count. But if they don't, so a lot of counties or municipalities don't have that, then it can go through ECMC. So next slide, please. All right, so for the 301G1 pre-application meeting under ECMC, we will be releasing a guidance hopefully by the end of the week, and there are some request forms and some different information that way that will all be on, it will be in our guidance document section, and we'll put an announcement on the website. So there'll be additional pages for multiple locations. There's a lot of information on that. Please take some time to go through it. If you have questions, let us know. And I'll like, but I think it's fairly straightforward. When those are requested, when we receive that request, the meeting will be scheduled within 30 days. Within that, there is a list in the request form for putting all parties that should be there. The operator really needs to make sure that all parties are listed there for the invitation. And that will be what goes out. If there's someone missing off of that, please forward it to them. It is the operator's responsibility to make sure everyone is invited. Next slide, please. So things that are in the request form, but also need to be there for the operator when you show up for the meeting to be discussed are siting, looking at various receptors, where there are alternative location considerations, looking at cumulative impacts, and including the admissions, any NOx standards, looking at surface water. In the development area, if you've talked to potential residential developers or commercial developers, will there be housing or warehouses nearby in the near future? Does that impact timing? This is all stuff that's been discussed before, but be aware and make a note of it and be ready to discuss it at the meeting. Also discussing best management practices and any of the new enhanced systems and practices that will be used on the locations. Next slide, please. As stated before, when the request is received, it will be scheduled within 30 days. The operator should make sure all those participants. And the meetings will be on either Tuesday afternoons, 2 to 2:45, or Thursday mornings, which is what we currently have for that 9 to 9:45 or 10 to 10:45. As we get more requests, if we need to add additional times, we'll do so, but we're trying to stick with that kind of Tuesday afternoons and Thursday morning timeframe. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the participants, I would like to point out there is a mistake in the rules. It references 301G1. The reference to 301G1B is actually 301G2B. That will be fixed in the next rule cleanup, but the list of participants is the list from 301G1B. So look at that, make sure it's CPW, CDPHE, the community liaison, which I know we are working on hiring, all local governments within a mile, any federal agencies. So think about if you're on BLM, forestry, state land board for both land and surface, land and minerals. Now, if you send out the invite goes out and they decline it, that's okay. That's part of they could waive it off of 301G1D. So we understand that not everyone can make every time all the time. So, but everyone needs to be invited. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the 301, so after the meeting, 301G1E, there's an operator needs to provide a summary of the meeting, and it needs to be sent out to all of the participants 10 days after the meeting. We have provided which will be part of the guidance, and on the form there will be a summary template. This does not have to be used. This is a tool, and it should meet the new accessibility requirements. And there's some more links in that for how to format and all of that. But like I said, there's a summary template for your use, but it is just that, a template. And I know there's been a lot of questions. We are working through it. Like I said, I'm hoping all of the guidance and request forms and templates will be up by the end of this week. And we'll put an announcement up. And please contact myself if you have anything else. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next up, we have Kristen.
Thanks, Sienna. Hi, guys. I'm Kristen Kemp. I'm the new Community Relations Manager at ECMC. I briefly introduced myself at a previous meeting this fall, but now I have the fun opportunity to actually chat at a meeting. So off the bat, I know typically these meetings are kind of ECMC staff talking, but I'm curious if you can like raise your hand or put it in the chat. Who on this call is actually responsible for any kind of community engagement at your companies presently? Like maybe you are responsible for it, or maybe you have a colleague who has to do it. I'm just curious. Don't all raise your hands at once, guys. Nice. Okay, so really just a handful of you. And that was somewhat what I was expecting. So these community engagement guidance materials are to assist you all, especially companies that don't necessarily have big outreach or communication teams, put into place the new rules, specifically 304C 19. And before I dive into what those rules are, I just want to share that ECMC is trying to practice what we preach. And so these rules are putting in place requirements for you all as operators to engage with the community, but also rules for ECMC as a state agency to engage even more with the community ourselves. And so that's what this new unit that I have the opportunity to lead is doing. And so Rebecca just mentioned that, for instance, we are in the recruitment phase of building to our team and adding environmental justice community liaisons who will be doing outreach across the state, West Slope, Front Range, and working with operators and with our permitting staff. So I just wanted to put that out there that we're sharing in this work because it's really important. But that's not what you wanted to hear about. You wanted to hear specifically about the rules. And Sienna, can you, or maybe I can click. Oops. Okay, so broadly, Rule 304C 19 is all about requiring us, putting our money where our mouth is, requiring us to engage more directly with the communities proximate to operations, and the rules put in place specific criteria for how we will do that engagement. And so, Sienna, can you give me the almighty power to screen share? Thank you. Give me 1 second, guys. So what I wanted to do with you all a little bit this morning is just frankly share our drafted guidance. So are you all seeing my screen, I hope? Okay. So this is meta. If we're talking about community engagement and how to engage communities and the work that we do, I thought it would be fitting to have the guidance on engagement engage you. I hope you're all laughing to yourselves. So I need to get this posted by Friday. As you heard from Stephen and Rebecca, we're obviously, extremely rushing to get guidance materials ready in time for the rules when they go into effect. So if you all have feedback on this and you don't all want to chime in right now, you can contact me offline through noon on Thursday. But this is our drafted guidance document. Goes through the purpose of why we care about community engagement. But specifically, some of you are already familiar with submitting community engagement plans in your OGTPs. They have been optional, and now, depending on your location, it will be required. So you can submit the actual document in essentially the format of your choice, so long as it converts to an accessible PDF. So if you want it to be like a text-based document, or maybe you want it to be a slide deck with images, that's at your discretion. We have samples if you want to see some. But ultimately, it just needs to be a document that can be uploaded via PDF through Form 2A. And like Rebecca mentioned, the document needs to be compliant with accessibility standards, and those tips on how to make it accessible are also posted online. So then, drilling into the nitty-gritty of this rule, AI, essentially 304C 19AI, in your community engagement plan, you need to include a description of your best management practices as they relate to mitigating adverse impacts to the proximate communities. And essentially, what's here in italics on this drafted guidance plan is what it takes to be in compliance with the rule. And so if your plan simply has a section that includes a description of your BMPs, you're in compliance. But what we've provided up top is a little bit more sort of qualitative substance for what you might want to consider including in that description. So then if we move on to a double I, a rule is that you as operators must certify that your written materials have been provided in accessible languages for all languages spoken by more than 5% of the population. And so, in the impacted proximate location. So compliance with this rule in practice is binary. If your plan includes a written certification, you're in compliance with what the rules require. But we have provided some optional subjective ways to demonstrate that. For instance, how did you determine what the languages are spoken in the community? How did you do the translation? Who did you hire to do the translation? As an aside, Google Translate is very literal. So for anyone on the call who happens to be bilingual or trilingual, you've probably gotten some chuckles out of Google Translate. It's extremely literal. And so especially for the scientific work that you all do, sometimes things truly get lost in translation. And I'll give you an example. For carbon sequestration, in English, sequester, carbon sequestration, taking and putting into the ground, translates in Spanish to kidnapping, literally. And so we wouldn't want Google Translate to translate that because the intended meaning is wrong. So that's just an example. But again, compliance is simply the operator including a written certification. So I'll move on to a triple I. And this is the bigger one. The outreach plan has to include a description, frankly, of how you're going to engage. How are you going to communicate with the proximate communities? Look at that, fixed a typo in real time. And so this is where I would really actually love your input in the next few days as we put this together. Compliance with this rule, again, is fairly binary. If your plan includes a description, which is at your discretion what you want to decide description means, you're in compliance. But these guidelines here provide lots of examples of what you might decide to include in your plan. And you can see here in draft mode, I have a question for you all. In your OGDP, elsewhere in the form, you'll be required to identify the proximate communities. I'm wondering if you want to repeat that information in this community outreach plan. It's not required because it will be required elsewhere in the lengthy Form 2A. But since you're not all, super eager to talk right now, maybe you can chime in later or email me later. I'm on the fence, to be honest, about having it be included in the outreach plan because duplicative information can be error prone. But on the other hand, this plan is all about engaging with the proximate communities. And so it also makes sense to indicate in the plan who those communities are. But aside from that, some things that you might decide to include in your description of outreach, a summary of the concerns or questions or comments that you have already in the pre-application phase heard from proximate residents or the community at large. And then bonus points, not just a summary, but your response to those concerns. Another example of something you could include in the plan is a commitment. Commitment is a vague word, I realize that, but a commitment to using layperson vernacular when possible. A lot of this stuff is technical, and when we're doing community outreach, we need to make it understandable. And then, of course, there are some really tactical examples of ways that anyone can do outreach. Do you do mailed postcards? Do you find the HOA locally? If there is an HOA, do you find if there are social media community groups, just assorted ways that you can contact the local community. And then if you identify those vehicles of communication, what are you going to tell them? So your plan could include a commitment to phases of operation. Maybe you do updates for construction versus drilling versus flowbacks. That's up to you. Or maybe you make a commitment to a cadence instead of production activity. Maybe you commit to a mailer annually, regardless, or maybe it's both. Maybe you commit to an annual mailer and production milestones. This is a little bit chicken and egg, but by the time you are submitting this community plan, you will have already had your pre-application meeting. So maybe your plan includes what you heard and who attended, how you accommodated any special requests, and how you would use that information moving forward for future meetings, should your project proceed. Another thing that you could include in the plan is how your company has been successful with community engagement elsewhere, and how you can apply those methodologies to this site. But again, compliance with a III is obtained at a most basic level by just including some kind of a description of how you're going to communicate and engage with the community. And then that's 304C19 in a nutshell. But I also wanted to add that compliance with this community outreach component is on par and of equal standing to every other component of your plan. So what you commit to in the community engagement plan, you will be held accountable to, and our forthcoming community relations team will be much more proactively working with communities to help them speak up and self-monitor, like regulate, let us know when they have a concern about operations in their neighborhood. And we will be partnering with you all to help you all stay compliant with what you commit to in your plan. And in the event that you're not, which I'm sure would never happen, but in the event that you're not, you would be hearing from our community relation liaisons, probably, an easy phone call to begin with. If it needed to, it could escalate to a warning letter. I'm sure it would never happen, but if it really needed to, we would have to escalate it to the enforcement team at ECMC. And that is all I had to say. So again, I wanted to be meta. If we're talking about an engagement plan, it needs to be engaging. So I would welcome your feedback. Oh, and I see Rachel. Thank you. Sienna, do you mind if I answer questions now, or am I supposed to wait till the end?
Please wait till the end.
Well, Rachel, I will answer your question at the end. That's all I had. Thanks, guys. Oh, do I need to stop sharing? I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Kristen. All right, John, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's John Morgan. I'm our geothermal lead scientist, so I've been engaged since the geothermal rulemaking last August in designing and setting up the program, and I wanted to give you a quick update on how it looks right now. So the program will be administered through 4 forms. We've revamped the Form 2. There's a new Form 2G, which is the location surface permit. Those have both been released and are live. There's going to be a new Form 7G, which is a module in the new Form 7/7W. It'll be like a combined thing in there on the new eForms platform. That's under development. We anticipate it being released very soon. And then there'll be an update to the Form 4 Sundry. That's also under development. We should see it in January is how we anticipate that looking. About guidance. So our big plan is to have a big, robust set of guidances specific to geothermal that's comprehensive and all is internally coherent and consistent. It points to each other and will live in its own place and its own web locale on our website is how we look at it. But since the 2 and 2G are live because the rules are in effect, we really wanted to start out by updating the Form 2 checklist, which has been done and that's under review. And we hope to release that updated Form 2 checklist to encompass the geothermal part of the Form 2 soon, as well as we have designed and written a whole new Form 2G checklist, and that's also under review. The eForm 7G guidance is targeted for early 2025. We haven't started developing that one yet, but it'll be done in the first quarter, certainly. And the Form 4 Sundry guidance will come with or soon after the Form 4 update. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Form 2 update. So the whole Form 2 has been revamped to come current with new legislative and rule requirements, not just from our rulemaking, but other ones. So there'll be a lot of text changes through the various tabs just to make it all, like for one thing, the low-hanging fruit is it's still referred to us as the COGCC in a lot of places. So we've revamped it to come current with the current state here at ECMC. the big change on the 2 is there's a whole new tab, the geothermal tab, and that contains the bulk of all the new informational requirements on the Form 2 for an APD for a deep geothermal well. The top part of that new geothermal tab will be a well overview section. That's general information about how you plan to use this deep geothermal well you're seeking to permit. And then the bottom part is the geothermal resource unit section. So in all of a deep geothermal operation can be permitted administratively. That's the default, including the establishment of geothermal resource units. So you're able to do that right on your APD, or you can do it afterwards on a Form 4. You'll be able to amend existing GRUs. The big part of it is a upload template, which for the geothermal unit area of review. And there's also a section in the GRU section of that geothermal tab where you have to narratively describe your unit operations plan. So let's take a look. Here's a couple quick examples of the revamp. So on the well name and contact info tab, you have the type of well, geothermal. There's a lot of business rules when you select that. A lot of oil and gas stuff's going to be grayed out, and only geothermal specific stuff will be available to you. Another example of the revamp on the casing and cementing plan tab, there's now on the flow zone and confining formation table, the geothermal flow zone type. Again, we're going to go the guidance and the Form 2 checklist, and then further guidance will go into detail on all these subjects. So let's take a look at the new geothermal tab. The well overview section up top, you're going to tell us what type of deep geothermal well it is, production, injection, science well. The new geothermal rules allow you to permit a deep geothermal science well. You'll also have in this section, we allow in the rules for alternative cementing programs for deep geothermal wells that are more applicable to that setting. You'll just have to narratively describe that to help our engineering staff approve the permit, make sure that your proposed well construction is safe. The bottom part of the geothermal tab is the geothermal resource unit section, and the meat of it is there on the buttons, the blue buttons you can see. It's a data template that you can download from the form, populate with all of the wells in your unit area of review, and then upload. Guidance is in development. And as I already stated, GRUs, you don't have to do a GRU on your permit for deep geothermal operations. You can also do it subsequently to getting your permit on a Form 4. So let's talk about the 2G. I'm not going to get granular at all on this one or show like a lot of in-depth slides, not even like the quick cursory slides like I just did for the 2. I just want to talk generally about it. It's going to look a lot like the 2A, but of course, with the specific informational requirements and plans that are required for a permit for deep geothermal operations. Guidance is still in development. We wanted to make sure we got the forms out in a timely manner since the rules are in effect now. If you want to submit a permit application before guidance gets released, just call me. More than willing to spend as much time as you need to help make sure that you have a good application in. And then there's a quick look at the 2G on this slide here. So you can see it looks a lot like a 2A with a bunch of tabs across the top. The surface and geothermal resources tab will be the main thing that's a bit different. But I also than the surface and minerals tab, but I wanted on the 2A, but I wanted to let you know that again, reemphasize these are meant to be a default administrative approval process, but we have the ability to elevate applications for a permit for deep geothermal operations to hearing if we feel necessary. And then to crib from Stephen a little bit earlier, we'll give you another update on the next month's operator meeting. Also, when guidance gets released, we'll make a little announcement on the news feed on the front page of our website. You can always also contact me anytime you want to know what's going on with the deep geothermal program. I'm more than happy to spend as much time as you need. So thanks so much. Take questions at the end. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have Sam.
Hello, thank you. Good morning. My name is Sam Champlin, and I'm a permit completion specialist here at the ECMC. Today, I just wanted to provide an update on permitting objective formations on the Form 2. Next slide, please. So we are now allowing more than one formation to be permitted on the Form 2 APDs for horizontal wellbores. Typical example where multiple formations would be added to the Form 2 is in the DJ Basin for the Codell Formation. Due to the thickness of the formation and faulting that may be encountered, there is an increased risk of porpoising into an adjacent formation, such as the Fort Hays and Carlisle. If you have a scenario that you feel like needs to be reviewed, please discuss with ECMC permitting staff for guidance in regards to that. Next slide, please. The reason we are making the change to allow multiple formations on the Form 2 APD is that when a horizontal well is drilled into a thin formation, it's common for the wellbores to porpoise out into adjacent formations. Previously, only one objective formation was allowed to be permitted for horizontal wells, creating a high probability for a permit violation. And as a corrective action for these permit violations, permitting staff would require an amended spacing order to space the adjacent formations. And if an order has already been spaced for those formations, then a Form 4 would be requested to add the completed formations to the Form 2 APD. Basically, we just want to tackle this issue on the front end by including the adjacent formations on the Form 2. However, this only applies to well locations spaced for the adjacent formations. The idea is this will reduce the need for Form 4 sundries to update the formations on your permit. Next slide, please. So the following requirements will be needed for the approval of the Form 2. You'll need an approved spacing order number at the time of the Form 2 submittal that includes all objective formations. If the spacing order does not include the adjacent formations, then an amended spacing application will need to be submitted to add the formations prior to submitting the Form 2. Secondly, on the Form 2, all objective formations should be in individual formation panels. Do not commingle formations in one panel, such as Niobrara Codell that you'd see typically with old historical vertical wells. Lastly, please avoid adding all space formations to the Form 2. To reiterate, this should only be done for target formations that have high probability of porpoising into adjacent formations. As an example, again, in the DJ, we would not expect to see all Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle on the Form 2. And if you have any questions or concerns, please feel to reach out to me or Penny Garrison. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Next up, we have Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Just to go along the lines of some of the transitions and changes here at ECMC, I've transitioned out of the compliance unit over to the strategic QA/QC unit, of which the production group team were part of that unit. I wanted to send a reminder out about the Form 7. Can you give me the next slide, please? Okay. So all of your water that's fresh water, produced water, recycled water, reused water should be reported. We've seen some stuff, some reports come in where the water was not reported. Even if you don't recycle or reuse water, it needs to be reported. Don't allocate to formations. They're not used in the water usage report. We do have guidance for each form up on the website. It's in regulation under forms. As a reminder, the Form 7 is due 45 days after the end of the month. That's beginning 7 of 2023. And the Form 47 is due 45 days after the end of each quarter, beginning with quarter 2023. One other thing that we added, it's not on this slide, but I'll make sure it gets into the presentation. Monthly water data reported on the 7 is now available on the new production reporting form page. And it can be viewed by choosing the produced water tab. We are the new production report. is up and running. It seems to be working fairly well. We haven't had too many glitches with it. Hopefully it'll help us get production reporting out quicker. And along the lines with that transition from compliance unit to the QA/QC unit, Jason Gomez is now the manager of the compliance unit, and we'll be talking to you later on. I know for a lot of you that know me, I was the main contact for emergency response and things like that. We'll be transitioning that over to Jason here in a little bit as soon as he gets his feet under him a little bit more. With that, we'll answer questions. And I think this is the end, though.
Thank you so much, Mike. For those who have put questions into the chat, I'm going to start from the top and read to the bottom. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now. First question is, on the Braden head testing, we have to keep everything for 3 years. Is it okay that is electronically stored? Do we need to keep the hard field copy?
So I don't know if there's anybody here from engineering, but my thoughts would be, as long as if that information is requested and it can be, if we need that in a hard copy, if it can be transferred to a PDF, that would be acceptable.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I think the rule says just have the information available, be able to produce the information, not necessarily.
All right, Kristen, it looks like you answered the next one. Greg, you have a question?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to note on that prior question, Rule 319 describes the records required for Braden head reporting. Rule 206 does specify that records are to be kept for 5 years, not 3 years. So make sure you're keeping those records for long enough. And it says to keep the records in the form requested by the director. So I would say the format that you get the forms in and submit them originally to the director is the appropriate format to keep them in your records. And if there's an engineering clarification that's needed on that, we can get that into the written responses for the question. Thanks for unmuting me.
Thanks, Greg. Kristen, it looks like you answered the next question. After that, can we circle back to the first part of the presentation with the dates on the CI, ESP forms, and guidance dates? Sure.
And to hopefully add some more to that questioner's answer beyond just the slide on the screen. At this time, we do not have more specific dates regarding the release of the updated Form 2A and 2B, other than to say that they will be released in early 2025. The only date specifics we can provide at this time is that the 2D and related form guidance will be released with enough time for operators to understand the form, ask questions, and submit the form prior to the rule-based February 15th deadline. And finally, like it says on the screen, the Form 2F will be released after the updated 2A, updated 2B, and the new Form 2D have been released. I will provide an update at the January operator meeting with more information regarding the forms and guidance releases.
And I'll pile on. I guess on behalf of all of ECMC, want to acknowledge, like, they're not available yet. And we're doing our best. The rulemaking, was adopted last month with an implementation date of December 15th. And it is what it is, and we acknowledge that.
Thank you all for answering that question. Next up, will DIC layers be updated on the ECMC map to match the CDPHE EnviroScreen website? Which website should operators be using to determine if a location is in a DIC right now?
This is Rebecca. I can try to answer that. So I know that the EnviroScreen 2.0 is coming out, but that is not official yet. So anything for that is on the EnviroScreen right now for the 1.0 is what is officially following CDPHE's DIC. And when there is an update and all of that, I don't know about the EnviroScreen part, but I do know the DIC communities will be updated accordingly.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Sabrina, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. Thanks, Sienna. This is Sabrina Trask, Cumulative Impacts and Energy Transition Manager at ECMC. This cumulative impacts rulemaking continue to incorporate EnviroScreen 1.0 into the rules. So going forward, operators submitting information to ECMC in the 300 series, so your OGDPs or 314, your CAP, you need to still use EnviroScreen 1.0 because that's the version that is in our rules. We recognize that this might become difficult as CDPHE moves to formally adopt EnviroScreen 2.0. We are in communication with CDPHE on when that formal adoption of 2.0 in their system will happen. And we're trying to coordinate potentially a rulemaking to update our reference in our rules to EnviroScreen 2.0 to happen kind of, hopefully, ideally close to when CDPHE formalizes that in their regulations. So that's a long way of saying keep using EnviroScreen 1.0 for all of your ECMC stuff until further notice, because that's what the version that is incorporated into our rules currently is. You're absolutely welcome to review EnviroScreen 2.0, and if you want to add that information into your OGDP as sort of like a side note, I would encourage you to put that in the Submit tab comment in your Form 2A. But we will be reviewing OGDP information based on EnviroScreen 1.0 until our rules can update that to 2.0.
Thank you for answering that, Sabrina. The next question, for updated Form 2s, are we only to use the updated forms for wells of OGDP submitted after 12/15 or any Form 2 submissions moving forward, regardless of the initial OGDP submission date, will be the updated version?
Hi, this is Sabrina again. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. I don't know if we can unmute Lauren. I would say, and I would defer to Ben Frizzell. I don't know if he's on this call, or defer to Sam. For the Form 2s, you'll use whatever Form 2 is available to you, right? So the Form 2s did not change and will not change as related to the cumulative impacts rulemaking. So there's nothing significant about the December 15th date for the Form 2s related to cumulative impacts. The revisions on the Form 2s are related to geothermal and related to what Sam talked about with the additional formations. So I would say if you're going to submit a Form 2, you'll just submit whatever form is available to you when you create that form.
I think I would agree with Sabrina. I think I would, if you want to send that question directly to me, whoever asked that, that would be great. Or we can try to look into that and have a more specific answer. But I think Sabrina covered it for right now. But again, want to make sure I fully understand the question.
Thank you, Ben. Lauren, I'll get you in contact with Ben after this. All right, if we do not have any additional questions, I appreciate you all for attending today's operator meeting. I will work on getting all this updated to the website by the end of the week. And thank you so much again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sienna.